Kia ora. It's politics from Canterbury coming at you straight out of Ireland. We've spent no expense spared for the coloured paper showing our Canterbury colours. We're joined from Wellington by Clint Smith, a bit of a political pundit. In the centre, we've got Sam McDonald. On the far left, myself, Kevin, a ex-parliamentary worker and historical guy. We're talking about for whom the poll tolls. Clint, this week we had a couple of polls. First one, Roy Morgan, not really used much in the mainstream media. Could you fill us in why the mainstream media don't use Roy Morgan?
Yeah, well, Roy Morgan's an Australian-based polling company. They're quite respected over there, but here they're not a member of the New Zealand polling organisation that adheres to certain polling standards, and they've got a bit of a bad reputation for their numbers jumping around a lot. You know, one poll of party be down 5%, then they'll be up 6% the next time, and maybe that's because they actually poll a bit more regularly, and so you see that statistical variation coming through. But nonetheless, the way the numbers jump around, they just don't have the respect that the New Zealand-based polling companies do.
Okay, and so we've got TVNZ do the Varian poll, Reed Research do the TV3 poll. So what we actually saw this week was Roy Morgan, which was used by some quality independent companies like Daily Blog and Scoop. We did chuck it out there for the viewers, but most of the media picked up on the Reed Research TV3 poll. Sam, there was another very interesting poll I picked up on last week or so. It's a Northland poll. What is it? What does that little mini poll do?
Yeah, well, I guess there's probably two things. I think firstly, whenever I look at a poll, it's more around the trend or the sentiment that's picked up around it, and you can't take it at face value on that point in time. So you've constantly got to look at what that long-term sentiment is and the way in which trajectories are moving. But I think you're right, in terms of the Northland poll, well, it certainly looks like Grant McCallum, the national candidate, has it in the bag, but there's a lot of anti-sentiment from government, which is quite surprising given the significant investment that has gone into Northland. So again, it's a point in time, but even things like name awareness, which has come through in this, is quite significant for new candidates.
On the plus side for Willow-Jean Prime, because Willow-Jean Prime is the Labour MP, she got a good list rating. She's at number 9, I believe, so might be out of the electorate, but still be in Parliament. One other important thing about this poll is I'd seen some commentary saying, this is Jonesy's time. Shane Jones from New Zealand First, he was maybe going to take it for New Zealand First. Where did he come in on the poll? Was about 5, or was it 6%?
Yeah, 6%, which is quite impressive in a sense, because his name recognition would be really high. So again, you kind of wonder whether there is a real mood out there for that anti-government sentiment, or perhaps a bit of distrust around people like Shane Jones, who have done things in the past with different sort of political parties that may have some consequences.
Yeah, my guess with this, and I'd like to jump in with Clint on this, is that Shane Jones goes around door knocking. Let's just assume he's working like a Trojan. He's door knocking all of Northland, but he says, "Hi, I'm Shane Jones from New Zealand First." Now, New Zealand First got 2-3% in the last election, or around 2.6%, I believe. That means probably about 96-97% don't really want to vote for New Zealand First. So he's got a little bit of a problem. How would this work for other MPs? I want to actually talk about Chloe Schwarbrick. How does it work that Chloe Schwarbrick, with about the Greens polling at about 12%, can win an electorate?
Yeah, well, I think the thing about Shane Jones is he's known Chloe. She campaigned her guts out. She had a very good electorate to run in as well, but a big machine from the Greens there, a lot of effort, and she outperformed the other two candidates. She was the better candidate of the three in 2020 Auckland Central. Whereas I think Shane Jones, maybe he's not done a few doors. It'd probably be the first time. He's running a number of electorates over the years. He's never won, and New Zealand First sees Northland as sort of their spiritual home base, but they've got two reasonably good candidates in National and Labour up there, and he'll struggle to sort of break through because he's not going to have the machine or the energy that Chloe brought to Auckland Central.
Well, the other thing with Northland, there was a party I hadn't heard of, but they're called Democracy New Zealand. I think it might be one of the more towards the freedom end of the spectrum. Again, the ex-National MP Matt King, and they were actually below Shane Jones. They were about 3%. So where I just want to go with this brief political discussion is, how many of these fringe movements are getting anywhere? I'd say none. I'd say nothing's happened in Northland other than Nationals taking it back quite clearly. And just because we want to represent a bit of Canterbury, we are an island. Do you think there could be a difference with someone like Raf Manji, who's not, and the reason is he's not necessarily associated with the political party? Is that an advantage for him?
I think there's always a real challenge under MMP for someone to pick up a seat not associated with a significant party. I think the other point around, talking about Chloe before Clint was, she had that strong brand that sat in behind the Greens, going against also a national swing, that last election, which after having someone like Nikki Kay there for so long, really would have changed the dynamics of that seat. But I think, again, it's really hard for people to cut through when you don't have that association under an MMP environment. So, look, who knows with a seat like this, but ultimately you've got to have a big machinery behind you, and people ultimately need to know what you stand for.
Well, I've been doing the numbers, and I'm not a numbers guy, but I've been doing the numbers, and basically the lowest Labour or National are polled in a seat is about 20%. So even in the truest blue electorate of Selwyn, and I was looking at 2017, I don't really count 2020 as being, even there, like Labour got 20%. So regardless of that, most seats like Ireland, you're already going to have Labour and National. They start with 20%. That's another difficulty for an independent, or, well, not independent, the top leader. But who knows?
Yeah, interesting. Your thoughts, Clint?
Yeah, I mean, I actually spoke to Manji about this a couple of months ago when I saw him, and I said, I think Top's got a better shot of getting over 5% nationwide than of him personally winning more than a third of the vote in Ireland. You look at Peter Dunn is the classic guy who managed to keep on winning in three-way races. And he was never that popular himself. It was because the vote was split. But that was a big effort. He managed to do that because he had been the MP for the area under Labour and then held on to it once he split away. I think it's a very big call. I think Top would be better trying to get over that 5% nationwide. There are enough voters who are kind of conservative, kind of green, kind of want a policy first, science first approach that might go for Top, but I can't see him winning Ireland.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Raf obviously had my role before me on the council in terms of being the local city councillor and chairing finance, and he does have strong name recognition across the community. But again, it's still a long way out from election day or when voting opens, and we've seen it last time, we've seen it before. Stranger things have happened in election years, just in terms of those ultimate dynamics. The real challenge is going to be when you've got National and Labour sitting in the 30s, as opposed to one sitting like, under the John Key sort of times. There was an expectation that you would sit in the 40s. So it does change the dynamics of an election, and ultimately just how much of that anti sort of government sentiment is going to be picked up and how that's fed through to different electorates.
Right, now we're going to wrap this up because, as always, politics on Canterbury is succinct. If you look that word up, it means we're quite short. Clint, you've said something really interesting, and I'm a bit thick and I never quite get it. With the electorates, you told me that an electorate, an MP will only ever be 1 or 2%. Could you just explain that? Because I don't. So you've got a normal electorate, I guess. Labour and National are voting. What you're saying is that no one really votes for the electorate, or they're only worth 1 or 2%. What's that?
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, every politician, of course, wants to believe that they're a special child in the sun, and it's them who is driving the votes towards them in the electorate. But when you look at the patterns, it's very much that what happens to the party vote happens to the candidate vote. As parties, especially the ratio between Labour and National Party vote, tends to be quite strongly reflected in the number of electorates they win nationwide. I think Matt King's an example of this. Matt King won Northland as a national candidate, and now look at him without the national brand behind him, he's nowhere. And Yeah, and no politician quite wants to believe that they're mainly winning because they're standing as a candidate for their party. But the truth of it is, without that party machine behind you and the recognition and the loyalty, it's very hard for to win votes and win an electorate.
I guess Gaurav Sharma proved that when he stood for Momentum, which is the name of a sort of Labour wing in the UK, and no one got it. Look, well, this has been a very worthy, very intellectual politics from Canterbury. I'd just like to end with something a little bit scurrilous. There was a bit of a fight this week between two, not personal friends, Winston Peters and David Seymour. Does anyone have any idea what that fight is about? I've got a really good idea, and I'm going to chuck it out, but not be too libelous. Anyone else have any idea what the fight between David Seymour and Uncle Winston was about?
I think one's at risk of being incredibly irrelevant, and the other one's probably going to get 15%.
I thought it was a bit more personal than that. I listened to David Seymour. He actually seemed genuinely angry about Winston Peters about something, and I did a bit of research, and I kind of worked it out. Clint, do you know what David Seymour said?
Well, no, I thought it was just over the worry that Winston may go 5% and then it'd be a three-way government, which would be very hard to run.
No, I don't think there's quite that. No, here's my theory. During 2020, where everyone's watching the COVID news for like 45 minutes, and so the sort of good old-fashioned political stoushes that I used to love didn't really make it to air. Well, Winston Peters, under parliamentary privilege, made a number of allegations just right towards the end of that particular sitting, and they concerned people that David Seymour knew. I'm not going to say what they are. 22nd of July, Hansard, general debate. David Seymour got up and was so upset that he got booted out, refuting some of these allegations. And it was quite personal. And what I thought was interesting, Winston said, I'm the guy that helped David Seymour with his end-of-life bill. Yes, he did help David Seymour, I'm presuming. But right at the end of 2020, there was a little bit of a parliamentary stoush, and it looked very personal. So all I say is the 22nd of July general debate. So a little bit of worthiness with politics from Canterbury and a little bit of gossip. And thanks very much, Clint. Clint on the right, Sam in the centre, Kevin on the far left.